We are live. And let me start recording. All right. Okay, we got one watching now. So let's wait. I think quite a few will be joining us here
Yes,
in a
it's
second.
not pulled up on mine yet.
Okay, I can see it.
We
I'm
lose
gonna
everybody?
type. I'm gonna type in the chat. Hello, all. Boom. Can you see that?
Hello.
We got 7 watching. I'm gonna give people about. Let's just give them about 5 minutes to show up.
Okay.
Can you see that?
I think I realized why I'm having this issue because my computer audio from my audio is picking up from my computer instead of my phone. So it's changing to my picture every time. Jeez.
Yep. So we got 10 watching right now. Jim Williams. Hello, Jim. Brother Jim in Roseville, Rockland. There's Wade, Racer X. Awesome. I don't know who Racer X is. Addie May May. Hello from Colorado. Joe. Haha, there's Joe. My Harry Ticks Facebook page. Everybody needs to subscribe to Harry Ticks. Like literally HARYTICKS. Subscribe to his Facebook channel. It's great. I wish more people would post memes. I post sometimes some memes, but hey, there's Travis. Travis, we got to do an interview, brother. I've been wanting to hit you up on that. HARYTICKS. All right. I am going to sign. There's Karen Rogers. I'm going to sign off so that I can save my bandwidth. I'm going to sign off of YouTube and get right on here to Zoom. All right. Okay. Can you guys see me? Now, Alan, you need to cancel one of your screens.
Um.
I would say cancel.
Yeah.
Look into the camera.
Yeah, this is the one I want, but
Yeah, cancel the other one.
yeah, the problem is that's when
I can cancel it. If you want, I can mute it.
actually yes, because if I leave it on, then
there you go.
then
Okay,
I will not disappear off my screen whenever I talk. But are you?
If I'm going to press stop video, are you cool with that?
Yeah, try it. See what happens.
Boom.
Yeah, it's still my screen. That's okay, Ward. Let's go with this. We don't waste any more time. It is
All
what
right,
it is.
here we go.
Yeah.
Well, we are recording right now. I want to introduce, well, first, I want to introduce Kirsten from Myrtle Beach, North Carolina. This is going to sound really strange. I live in Page, Arizona, rural Page, Arizona, which is literally, if I'm not mistaken, the most rural town in the lower 48. It would have been all 50 except Barrow, Alaska, is like 10 hours from Fairbanks, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a long drive. But we have to drive about 5 hours to take a plane. But this is Kirsten. I'm so grateful. She's going to be fielding the questions. Alan and I are going to be having our discussion, and Kirsten's going to be fielding the questions that y'all raise. Kirsten, you ought to know that pretty well, being in North Carolina. Y'all, that you all put on the YouTube chat box. And I'm so thankful. I praise the Lord for Kirsten being willing to do that.
Hey,
And
everyone.
yeah. Say hi. Say hi.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
Yeah, and you're probably wondering, is she an atheist or a theist? I'll let you tell them, Kirsten.
I'm not an atheist. I'm a
Okay.
Christian.
Okay. All right. Good. So she's actually going to disappear, and then I want to introduce my very, very special guest, a gentleman whom I adore, absolutely adore him. Alan Bondar. I'll just tell you a little bit about how I met him. I've known about him for years, but I first met him. I believe it was in 2000. Was it 19? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, actually, it's going to be before that word. It's going to be at least 2018, maybe 2017, but I think 2018 sounds about right.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Yep.
I know one thing is for certain. I went out there, whatever year it was, and met Alan, and we went to a restaurant together, and we sat down, and Alan and I, uh, we are two peas in a pod. There's no doubt about that. Other than the big glaring issue, which is
The
tonight, which
elephant
is
in the room. Yeah.
yeah, the elephant in the room, which is he's an atheist and I'm a theist. I'm a Christian theist, and we went to this restaurant. We sat down together and just had the most warm, authentic conversation. And I will say right now, as I introduce him and kind of let him introduce himself too, but I will say that there are many Christians. Like I value the body of Christ. I value Christians deeply. But there are a lot of Christians that it's very scary to be authentic in front of them. And Alan was one of those guys that I just was able to pour out my whole heart, my past, my history, everything. And he never judged me. And this is while he was a professing Christian. He never judged me, and he just loved me through it, and I appreciated that. And so as we talk tonight, I want you to know that underlying all this huge philosophical theological division between us, we love each other. We do love each other. And I will also say that, since he's become an atheist, I don't know exactly the timeline. Maybe Alan can share that as he introduces himself. But since he's become an atheist, I had seen a couple things, and naturally it disturbed me because, he was a very dear friend of mine and is a very dear friend of mine. So it disturbed me, and I responded. Sometimes when we get disturbed or shocked or whatever, we can respond in a not so charitable way. And I just want to be honest with everybody. Everybody who's my Facebook friend who was watching any of the dialogue, they probably saw that, oh, Fenley was not so charitable. Surprise, surprise. I don't like that. I always want to be charitable. I always want to be gentle, kind, loving. I always want to speak what I feel and believe is the truth. But I want to do it in gentleness, speak the truth in love, sort of a thing. And I know Alan wants to do the same. I know he does. And so you probably saw us, spar a little bit and maybe get a little, nastier than we should have. But tonight we had a come to Jesus. Oh, I'm sorry, Alan. But we had a come to Jesus meeting. We talked last night, and it was warm, just precious. And I got to meet his dear partner Ray, and she is just precious as well. So thank you for joining us. We're going to have a discussion, and it'll be I think it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be lively. We're going to question each other. This is a mutual interview. We didn't want to. At least I didn't. I didn't want to do a formal debate. Um, that may be down the line in our future, but right now I didn't feel great about something like that. I felt like it would be great to just have an authentic, natural dialogue with Alan. Oh, let me turn on there it is. Where hold on, I'm just getting used to this thing. There it is. Um, and yeah, if I could request, hold off on the questions until the discussion's over. We're planning on going until about what is it, 6:30, 8 o'clock Eastern time, which would be 5 o'clock Pacific time. So hold off on the questions until then, and then just fire away. But anyway, Alan, I'm rambling. I want you to have a little bit of a chance to just sort of, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, by the way, I want to let you know he's got a book which is called How to Kill God the Easy Way. I'm going to let him introduce that book to you. And then just go for it, Alan. Introduce yourself, maybe, in a paragraph or so. Tell us about your journey as best as you can. Maybe give us a timeline, because you got a lot of people who read your other book, Journey Between the Veils, and then seeing the Old Testament through New Covenant eyes. You could talk about those a little bit. Um, just tell us about yourself and your journey and how you came to be an atheist. A lot of people love you. A lot of people care for you, and they care for me, and they want to know what happened. What happened, Alan? Well, tell us about yourself, okay?
All right. Well, let me start by saying that if a very kind and emotional introduction such as that was enough to draw someone to Christ, that was it. And I'm coming running, man, just to come to Jesus, like you said. But no, unfortunately, that was not going to be enough to get me out of atheism. However, I do very much appreciate the introduction, Warren. You're absolutely right. We are great friends. Thoroughly enjoyed our times together when we talked. Last night was wonderful. Like you, I also am saddened by the interactions we had on Facebook. Sometimes it's weird how you can just hide behind text and just say you can just kind of be cruel, especially with friends, and it was kind of sad. So I'm glad we're past that, and I'm glad we're doing this because this is far healthier. So I'm glad you said that, and I feel exactly the same way. So it's a real joy to be in your presence and talking to you and doing this show, because I think I think a show like this, whether it's just one or two or however many it ends up being, I think a show like this is very helpful because it'll allow us to dialogue about our differences and see where the other person is. What's causing each of us to see things differently? Why are we trapped in our particular positions? So I think that's good. I think this is good dialogue, and I think other people will have a chance to kind of peer into that. So I'm grateful for this. I think this is a really wonderful opportunity, Ward, and I couldn't imagine a better person to do it with. So
Hmm.
I really appreciate the opportunity. This is a real delight for me.
Thank you.
As far as my timeline, I've done interviews elsewhere where I've talked a lot about my journey, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in that because I'm sure everybody would rather hear about our differences and have us discuss rather than just me rambling about my life again. Um, and not to mention, I detail it in my book. So, I wrote How to Kill God the Easy Way, for several reasons. Number one, it was therapeutic for me. I needed to write it because I needed to explore why I got out of Christianity. That was a very surprising thing for me. I didn't understand it either. I was just like, what happened? How did this happen? So I needed to explore that. So I wrote that book and in my exploration of that myself. I also feel like because I escaped and now I understand why I escaped and how I escaped, I want others to be able to take the same journey as me. So I wrote the book in a way that's somewhat different than you'll find in other atheist books, at least from what I've seen. Sure, there's probably thousands that I haven't read, and so I can't speak across the board. But from what I've seen, what I've observed, what I've read, what I've been told, it's a very unique book. It takes a very unique approach. It takes you on a journey, unraveling, so to speak, the brainwashing that takes place that keeps you trapped in the Christian mindset. Now, I know as a Christian, that sounds very foreign to you. It sounds ludicrous to even say. So I understand that mindset. When I was a Christian, I would have been like, oh, that's ridiculous, blah, whatever. And so I get that. But the intention of the book is not to just go in and start attacking all the Christian views. That's not the approach of the book. It actually talks about all the things we actually believe as Christians, and it one step at a time shows you why there's flaws in that thinking, and it undoes the brainwashing one slow step at a time. And that's the approach I took in the book. And the reason I decided to take that approach is because um, when I first got out of Christianity, I started trying to, especially after my interview with Jen Fishburne, where she was the first one to interview me as an atheist, and where I finally came out of the closet, so to speak. Um, she asked me, what was the reason that you escaped? And I thought, I don't know. And that's where I went on this journey. I had to understand it. You kind of know me, where you're a lot like I am, dogs on a bone. We got to know the answer. We got to figure it out. It's got to make sense, right? It's a puzzle. Um, and at any point, Ward, if I'm rambling, you need to shut me up, just go ahead. Um, but at any rate, I recall, and I was listening back to some Christian music because in my journey trying to understand why I got out of Christianity and why it was so easy for me to just kind of like shut it off and be done with it. I wanted to understand it, like I said. So I went back into it. I started reading the Bible again, started trying to listen to old music I've listened to, sermons, things like that, just trying to get a grasp back of what it felt like to be a Christian. One theme that kept coming back over and over again was this idea that people are addicted to Jesus. I'm addicted to God. I'm addicted to Jesus. Addicted. Like this is great, this common theme. And I was like, holy smokes. And something hit me like a ton of bricks. Host would like to unmute you.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Did I get mute?
Oh, I see. That's your other one. They hear you. My bad. That was my fault. Yeah, go back to what it was. That was my fault. I could hear you, but I saw that it was muted. So you have one recording your audio and your video is on a different one. Is that right?
Yep. Okay.
Everybody, my
So I think
apologies. That was me.
that's okay.
Okay, go ahead, Al.
Way to destroy a train of thought, Ward. I'm
You're-
just saying, man. You're good, dude. No worries. So where was I? Oh, the addictive thing. So that hit me like a ton of bricks, and I thought to myself, wow, when I was a smoker, a heavy smoker, completely addicted to nicotine, I couldn't ever escape, right? You know, you spend your whole life trying to get out of it and you just can't, you can't seem to quit. And I read a book about how to quit smoking, and it was about removing the brainwashing that makes you think you need that cigarette. And I was like, this is weird, but I'm going to read it because I wanted to quit so bad I had to try anything. So I read this book, and it was so amazing. It was like magic. At the end of this book, it was like I just couldn't stomach another cigarette. Something just instantly changed in me. I was like, what am I doing? Why did I think this was so wonderful? This is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And I suddenly, it was almost like instantaneously, I went from loving and thinking I need this cigarette to hating it with a passion and saying, I will never do this again. And that was it for me. I couldn't stomach it. It was gross. And so when I made that connection, I thought to myself, addicted to Jesus, what if the reason Christians love Jesus and God as much as they do is because they're brainwashed to think they need him just like I was with nicotine? And so I thought, I'm going to take a shot at this and I'm going to write a book detailing this very issue. And I'm going to pattern it and try to help undo the brainwashing that makes us think we need God. And then that I realized was what happened to me. It just occurred to me one day that, wow, what am I doing? I don't believe God exists. Why am I still holding on to this thing? And just like that, it was gone. And I no longer needed God anymore. And it was just like, why am I living my life for something that doesn't exist? So that's the long and short of my story and why I wrote the book and what the book's about. So I can leave it at that and turn it back over to you because I don't want to keep on going. But that's essentially the long and short of my story.
Okay, and make sure your video still there? Because I'm recording this.
Okay.
And I can see your video. So on my end, when I'm recording this, so it's all good on my end. But for whatever reason, the video is disappearing. I just got a message from my son that it's disappearing. So
my video is disappearing when I'm talking.
I see it fine, and this is what is being broadcast to YouTube, as far as I know. So I see you fine. So in terms of the recording, which is what I'm going to upload, this is live for our listening audience right now because I wanted people to be able to.
You know what we're going to do, Ward? I'm just going to switch it back to my phone because this is just causing too much problem, and I will deal with the audio issue that I'm having. So give me a second. I will switch this up, and we will be done with this mess. Hang on, everybody.
Yeah, they just see your name on YouTube. So
okay.
Sorry. People are gracious. Now you'll want to cut off one of the microphones.
Okay. There we go. Now, if I'm not mistaken, ask whoever you just said was your son. Ask if that's fixed.
I see it.
I am now talking. And any issues with the video audio, anything else? You good?
It looks good to me. You're as handsome as ever, Alan.
Thank you. And
Absolutely.
and from the feedback, my video's not disappearing anymore.
Nope. Well, I don't know. I'll
All right.
probably
Well,
get another message from my
let
son.
me know, because if it's the same issue, then I'm going to switch back because it was much better for me on that end. But if it's good now, we'll leave it.
Okay. Well, at least I could see you either way, but for some reason, I think something over
Yep.
YouTube was going freaky.
Yep.
Okay, good. Oh, yep. Austin says it's perfect. Thank you, beloved boy. I love you.
Thank you. Thank you, Austin.
All right. So, okay. So here's a question. So you were pastor of Lift Church for 10 years, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. During that 10 years, you wrote the 2 books. Is that correct?
No, I wrote reading the Bible through New Covenant eyes while I was I started reading the Bible through New Covenant eyes while I was still a youth pastor at my church in Florida, Westminster Presbyterian Church. And the first 3 chapters of that were about audience relevance, about reading in context, things like that, time statements, all that kind of stuff. Not knowing at the time that I was writing it that it was going to lead me to full preterism. No idea, Ward. No idea. I was writing this for my teens because I thought it was going to help them interpret the Bible. Like I said, little did I know that as I started to apply my own principles, I would end up becoming a full preterist, which was shocking to me. So anyway, in that journey, I became a full preterist and lost my job at the church. They ousted me, had to go figure out my life, became a pastor of a church we planted. At the time, it was Messiah Reformed Church, and we changed the New Covenant Eyes Church, ultimately changed it to Lift Church, and that's what we stuck with for 10 years. I won't go into the details about the change of names. If you're interested, it's in my footnotes in the book. But I finished the book after I lost my job. And then, no, maybe that's not accurate. I think it was kind of halfway in, halfway out. It's I can't remember the detail. It's been, goodness gracious, it's been a long time. But at any rate, it was somewhere in that trajectory, like somewhere along the lines of losing my job, starting my new church. I finished the book and published it. That was reading the Bible with the New Covenant eyes, and that was my first full preterist book. The journey between the veils, that I wrote. Goodness, it was quite a number of years later. I was a speaker at Don Preston's conference about the body of Christ, and made some observations about the 40 cubit journey that the priests would take between the veils of the temple, and recognized that the veils represented Christ's flesh, and he had to remove the veil 2 times if that's in fact where the 2 veils were. And if that's in fact the case, at the end of that second veil is the Holy of Holies. So that would be his entrance into heaven again. And so that second time he removes his veil permanently and enters into heaven. So those are kind of my thought. And Don Preston said, "Hey, if you want to write this book, I'll publish it for you." And I said, "Sure." That was absolutely amazing. So that's when I wrote that book. And I was already a pastor of Lift Church for a number of years, 3 years probably at that point. And that's after the 3 years I was already a pastor of the other 3 versions of my church until we became Lift Church. So anyway, that's the history of those 2 books.
Okay. So, and I'm trying to speak on, like, nobody's talked. We just decided to do this. And so nobody's really been trying to flood my brain full of stuff. So I'm kind of glad that this is somewhat, impromptu. We just decided this yesterday. We've been planning this for a while, but we decided to do this yesterday. So during that time, we all know the phrase cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. In the 10 years that you were pastor of Lift Church, were you experiencing at all, up until like the time that you left, were you experiencing any cognitive dissonance about because you were Reformed, you believed in the deity of Christ, and you're full preterist? I mean, those are kind of our, sovereign grace. From what I remember, you were sovereign grace. You attend Reformed Theological Seminary, so you're sovereign grace. You believed in the deity of Christ, and you believed in the absolute fulfillment of all things, full preterism. So those were sort of your three, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but those were your three building blocks. Okay. Um, during that time, were you experiencing any cognitive dissonance? I mean, all of us experience cognitive dissonance. I know that. Atheists do it, theists do it, agnostics. We all have some sort of cognitive dissonance. And as I always tell people, there are always holes in every single theological or philosophical system. There are always holes. Okay, but what would you say if you had, which I assume you did, uh, cognitive dissonance that you can remember, if you remember it? What was it? What were those areas? One, two, three areas of cognitive dissonance that you can remember while you were the pastor of Lift Church after you wrote Journey Between the Veils?
To the degree that you're describing, none. I would agree with you on that basic level. Where there are times where I was reading a text and be like, "Man, this isn't sitting right," and I needed to figure it out. And that's what always drove us to come up with better interpretations of the Bible and make more sense and be like, have those aha moments. That I had just like you did, and still do probably. But I can honestly tell you, there was never a time that I actually got to a point where I said, this may not be true. God may not exist. Um, but I'm just going to ignore that. That was just never the case for me. It never happened while I was a pastor. I can tell you that when I was a pastor, I would tell my church congregation all the time. I would say, truth matters to the degree that even if I were to discover that God does not exist, I would 100% leave Christianity. Because what's the point of living a lie? Right. And I'm not saying I'm right. I believe I'm right. I'm not trying to make the case here to undergird you or anything. I'm saying if, in fact, God doesn't exist, what would be the point of living for a God that doesn't? I mean, it'd be equivalent to living for the Easter Bunny, right? I mean, that'd be stupid. So I used to tell them that, and that was part of my encouragement to them to study, study, study. Never quit studying. Always ask questions. Never worry about where it leads you. The most important thing in your life is truth. And I used to tell them that all the time. So for me, I never had a fear of losing my faith because I was 100% confident that that would never happen. I 100% pursued truth no matter what. And just for some reason had this intense confidence that there is no possible way that God does not exist. So it was almost like I knew I was right, but if I wasn't, I'd be willing to jump ship because that's how important truth is for me. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, and remember, uh, we shared the same perspective because, as we discussed last night, you were presuppositional in your approach to Scripture,
Yes, I was.
in contrast to people who are more classical or evidential apologists. So, as a presuppositionalist, well, even the classical or evidential apologists who are reformed, we believe in eternal security, right? Which I still believe in with all my heart, obviously. So, would you say, and this is where I was just talking about it with my son this evening, and this is very important. I really believe I'm speaking on behalf of the people who love and adore you, who followed your work, who enjoyed your work, who were blessed by your work. Okay, I want to try to speak on their behalf. So as I ask these questions, not meant to offend at all. It's to get an idea of where we're trying to figure out your transition, right? So here it is. In the Bible, there, as you were studying the Bible, as you were teaching the Bible, and not just teaching, but actually ministering to people in your church, you saw certain things that the Bible teaches and you believed them wholeheartedly, so much so that you wrote about it. Now, that takes an intense amount of conviction. To write about something, you have to be pretty convicted because it's tedious, as I know. I mean, I've written a book too, and it's just like a couple, one online and one in hard copy, and it's just like, gosh, you pour your whole life into it, and you're excited about it, and the publishing, the artwork, the ISBN, all that stuff. It's a big process. So here's my question. Let's say, as I brought up last night, when I was at CSU Sacramento, I was in a comp studies class. They asked us to give a speech, and typical liberal university. Give a speech on something that you're convicted about. And at the age of 18, I was kind of a numbskull, but I believed in the deity of Christ. I still do. And so I spoke on that, but I also knew, wait a minute, I'm talking to some people who are atheists, maybe agnostic, maybe a Christian or two, three. I don't even know what the professor believes. So the way I approached it was this: whether the Bible is a myth, which we're going to get there. I want to get your thoughts and opinions on the Bible. But whether the Bible is the myth or the Word of God, this character, Jesus, claimed to be God. Now we're getting even beyond just theism, but we're getting into actual Christian theism, right? Obviously, there's a difference. There's Islam, there's Judaism, there's Christianity. But I know that a lot of people are wondering this. So, Alan, when you look at the Bible as let's say, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say from your perspective, it's a book with a lot of myths, maybe some truths, maybe some historical truths. Do you believe, like those three areas that I brought up, do you believe that the Bible as a book of myths, let's just say hypothetically, that it teaches full preterism, that it teaches the deity of Christ, that Christ claimed to be God, and that the apostles and the Old Testament even were kind of pitching him as God? And do you believe that Bible teaches that God is absolute, that mythical God, right, teaches absolute sovereignty? What would you say to that? And then after you answer that, tell me your thoughts on those three areas now. I know it sounds crazy, but from an atheistic perspective.
All right. So when you couch it in the terms that you did, assuming it's a mythological book, I would agree 100% that it teaches all of those things. That is the story of Scripture, of the Bible. So I don't know that was the original intention of the Bible. I think that the scribes that, in retrospect, inserted many of these things, including the prophecies, the stories about Jesus, the exaggerations, the mythological aspect of Jesus, the miracles, all that. I think that got retrospected into it. So it ended up becoming that. But if you just take the Bible as it stands, what we have today, because that's what we have. So if you just take it and you hand it to me and you say, what does this teach? What is the overarching concept of this Bible? I would say, number one, it's preterist, obviously. I just, for the life of me, dude, and I just want to take I really want to take a pause here, because I want your listeners to hear this from me, because you've said a lot of very positive things about me, and I think your listeners need to hear this. Ward, if there was a person that I could say understands and grasps the Bible more than anybody I've ever met, it's you. You're a covenant creationist, you're a preterist, you're a sovereign grace person, you get all of these doctrines absolutely 100% right, if in fact you just let the Bible speak for itself. Okay, so I just want your hearers to hear it, because if you want to remain a Christian, keep following the Lord, because he's absolutely feeding you what the text is teaching. And that's great. If that's your goal, if that's what you want to know, what the text is teaching, wonderful. In fact, if you want to know what the text is teaching, you can come to me. I'll tell you the exact same stuff. I 100% agree with what the text. If Ward and I were to sit down and just have a conversation about what the Bible teaches, this wouldn't be a discussion of from opposite sides. We would be 100% in coherence. So to me, what the text teaches is we're 100% clear on, in my opinion. Whether or not those were the intentions, whether or not that's the original, I don't know. I don't care. What we have is what we have, and that's all we can base it on. I can't tell you what the original writers meant by it, what they were trying to accomplish, whether they were trying to deceive or not. How can we know that? We just can't. So that being said, I don't think, and this is just personal opinion, because neither one of us can really know what was going on 2,000 years ago. I have no idea. My opinion is that it seems like what was going on is that there was a lot of mythologies that were being pulled from other nations and other mythologies from other gods to make the Yahweh character far greater than the other god characters that were on the scene at the time. And that's not uncommon. I mean, you can see all of the different nations would want their god to be the better god, and that's that's not uncommon with mythology. It's not uncommon with comic books today. You try to create a comic hero that is better than the last, and you want him to be like super awesome and whatnot. So I think that the story made Yahweh to be this incredible God. Many of the stories, if you are able to be honest and look at the fact that it has pulled from so many other mythologies to create the story, then you can see that this is most likely a mythology. Now, when I was a Christian, the argument I would use is, oh, but God is sovereign, right? The sovereign God. That the Bible gets you with this. God is sovereign. So because he's sovereign and because he is omniscient, he allowed these stories to borrow from other mythologies because he was able to, from the beginning, show that he would be the greatest, but it was always his idea. And he put these other stories together to allow the Bible to be. So I would do anything I could to square the Bible with truth. And I'd be like, oh, no, that couldn't have been stolen. That couldn't have been a myth. And God is real. I know that. And so I would do these gymnastics with it just to get to a point where I'd be like, okay, God is real and the Bible is true, and that's what I did with it. So, do I think the Bible is true? I don't. Do I think God is real? Obviously, I don't. So therefore, I don't think God is sovereign. I don't think there's a God, so therefore, he's not sovereign. Obviously, I don't think preterism is true, because clearly, I don't believe there's a God to even send Jesus back to destroy Jerusalem. So on and on and on. You track back with any theology I have, and I'll say, no, none of it's true. It's all mythology. So if you're going to ask me, what's my theology of the mythology, I will say everything you will say. If you ask me what's the truth, I will say it's all mythology and there's no such thing as God. And that's where I would land.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And I know that all the people who, like I said, who have followed you, I really believe I'm speaking on their behalf when I ask that, because they're curious about it. They want to know your journey, and they want to know it not just because oh, what's Alan believe now, but because they love you, and that's the truth. They care for you. They want to know. They care for you like I do. I don't know if they love you as much as I do. I love you a lot, dude. but I will say ask this though. So and this will kind of maybe be a little bit of a segue into your thoughts, your paradigm, your philosophical worldview now. Okay. And we got so much. And for those of you who are watching, Alan and I have talked about, we may end up having a part 2 and part 13. We're not sure yet. We want to make sure that, people honestly are interested and want to find out more about what we believe to be the truth. Now, there are a lot of scared Christians. I appreciated Tristan being willing to talk with me. Have you heard of Tristan?
I have. Yeah.
Okay.
He's the one who just interviewed on Derek Lambert's show, right?
I interviewed him. I don't know about Derek Lamb. Maybe he did. Maybe, but
Oh,
I just interviewed
maybe
Tristan.
it's a different Tristan. Might be a different Tristan. I don't know.
Yeah, great guy, great guy. But he left Christianity. But so two questions as we branch out into this area of your philosophical worldview now, and we'll start to discuss some of the areas of contention between theists and atheists. And by the way, for those listening, I will never try to prove the resurrection of Jesus Christ to anyone. I will not do it. I'm not like William Lane Craig. I am not a classical or evidential apologist, not by any stretch of the imagination. I don't believe it can happen. And I appreciate that you brought up the Easter Bunny. Because one of the things I always tell people is like, because you and I'm, and this is where I'm going to ask you about this, but when you were a professing believer, you used to deny free will. We were reformed. We were, quote, Calvinistic, even though Calvinism is a system, as you know, a covenant theology, and that's a big thing with Calvinists. Calvinists love to say, "Oh, you're not a true Calvinist unless you embrace covenant theology," and we're sitting there going, "Well, I agree with Tulip, so yeah, half, Calvin." But let me ask you this question first: did the doctrine? Because I know Jen
Fishburne.
Fishburne. I think she dabbled with some Israelite only. There are a lot of people who believed in Israelite only, who then became deists or agnostic or atheists. Um, uh, two questions. Do you believe Jesus was a real person? And did Israelite only have any impact on your departure from theism / Christianity?
All right. Let me start with the second one first. No, Israel only had zero to do with that. In fact, I fought vehemently against Israel only. In fact, to this day, if we were to join forces and just discuss the biblical narrative, not whether you're atheist or theist, but just the narrative, as I was sharing a few minutes ago, we would be on the same page. And I would say, no, I think it's a ludicrous position. I still think it is. I find it to be, it fails to recognize the goal of the biblical narrative, which was to be fruitful and multiply. That's how the story begins. That's how the story ends. And if in fact Christ marries his church at the end of Revelation and everything ends there, where's the multiplication? Where's the fruit that comes from that? That's silly. So just that alone made me say, no, Israel only can't be. It just doesn't make sense, because if Christ marries the bride at the end, then the whole point of the story is from here on out, by faith alone, he will produce children. So that made more sense to me than anything else. So the story never ended at Revelation. It was about fruit being multiplied, the children being born. So anyway, so to answer that question, no, Israel only never, ever, ever had any issue with me. When it comes to Jesus, your question, in some ways, it depends on what you mean. First of all, if you're talking about the Jesus that's born of a virgin, that did all these miracles, that was raised from the dead, then no, he absolutely didn't exist, because from everything I can tell from science, virgins don't produce children. So, not inseminated, but that wasn't a thing back then. But even today, if you're not inseminated, then you can't have a child. So, no, I don't believe that's possible. I think the only reason Christians believe it is because the Bible tells them so. But other than that, you have zero reason to believe that that's true. Do I think that Jesus, the non-virgin version, the non-legend version that created, miracles and stuff, did he exist? Well, now we have a different question altogether. Can you prove it? You can't. There's no evidence outside of the Bible that validates that this Jesus existed whatsoever. Is it possible that he did? Sure. I don't care whether he did or didn't. I mean, there's plenty of very charismatic and leader quality people that have started cults all over the world. We've seen it tons of times. Joseph Smith, for example. I mean, it's not that hard to find one. Jim Jones. I mean, we see this all the time. So could Christ have existed and been that leader that just caused people to follow him? Sure. Whether or not Josephus mentioned him, this particular Jesus or not, there's no way of knowing. We know that the Testimonium Flavianum, the one that is very up for debate. Everybody says that it's completely nullified as Josephus's writing whatsoever. It was added later, way later. So the whole resurrection part and all these miracle parts of Josephus, that didn't exist. He didn't write that. The only possible exception is Josephus mentioned a guy named Jesus and his brother James. Okay, well, because the Bible mentions a James and Jesus' half brother, maybe it's the same Jesus, but we don't know that. It could be any number of Jesuses. I mean, Josephus, I think, mentions like 24 other Jesuses that existed. So could be anybody. So to my point, I'm just saying there's no way of knowing. Did he exist? Did he not exist? Maybe, maybe not. Who cares? At the end of the day, even if he did exist, and even if he did exist and was the guy who started this whole thing, we also don't know. There's no way of knowing. Paul, this guy named Paul, could have been the guy who started the whole Jesus movement. It may have had nothing to do with a guy named Jesus, or maybe it did, or maybe it didn't. Again, we have no way of knowing. There's no documentation for it, nothing extra biblical. Everything Christianity bases its religion on is the Bible. And there's nothing that validates the Bible as true other than self-authentication, which is the chief argument for Christianity. The Bible says it's true because the Bible says it's true. And I mean, I used to think that was a great argument. And now I'm just like, why in the world did I think that was a good argument? Anyway, that's my position. That's where I'm at. I'm just floored sometimes that I actually thought that was a solid argument for the validation of Scripture, which in my opinion is just circular reasoning and it doesn't hold any water. So anyway, I'll end it by saying yes and no. Maybe Jesus existed, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But it's definitely not the legend guy.
Okay. So on that note, yes and no. One of the things you mentioned earlier was that you questioned the integrity of Scripture based upon what I assume are ancient Near East stories about Yahweh, different gods, different stories that the Bible sort of mimics, and even possibly, I'm sure you probably have heard about the different stories of messiahs and Jesus and sacrifices and substitutions even in ancient Near East literature. How would you then, based upon what you just said about Jesus, kind of a yes and no? Well, we got Paul defending it, maybe Josephus, seems like, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Would you feel the same way about those ancient Near Eastern stories of other, basically articulating their views about other gods and, mythological characters? Would you say that they could be yes and no, and so that maybe they might not be true? In other words, what you were saying earlier about Yahweh, well, there are plenty of other stories about their versions of Yahweh. Do you see where I'm kind of going with that?
Yeah, I do. And I guess my answer would be the same, yes and no. Every single one of these stories very well may have been based on a person that they legendized, because the story was much cooler when you add a whole bunch of details that weren't true. So yeah, maybe Hercules did exist, but he wasn't the legend of Hercules. But you do see parallels with Samson and Hercules, and you're just like, wow, that's really odd how similar they are. Even their stories almost to a T. So there's a lot of parallels. So I think every story, probably the legend was based on a person. I'm going to guess that very well may be the case, but it also could be just some guy came up with it. I don't know. Do you know?
No, it's a good question. So, well, then with Jesus, if it's kind of a yes and no, he may have existed, may not have existed.
Correct.
You're saying it's possible that he did exist.
Not the virgin version,
Right.
but the man version, sure.
Yeah. And so, okay. So now let's, if you don't mind, this is kind of a big change. Let's kind of merge into worldviews here. And this is where we will probably talk about some things that are, they're kind of near and dear to evidential apologists and classical apologists. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering, basically, evidential apologetics is a system of thinking, and Alan knows he's very familiar with the differences, but it's basically a system of thinking that uses proof or evidence to try to defend Christianity or theism. For instance, okay, how many people saw Jesus? Archaeological evidence, Shroud of Turin, things like that. Whatever. Um, Alan knows I'm a presuppositionalist, so I don't have to go down that road, and I don't even use that because I don't believe I can prove anyone into the kingdom of God. It's just I don't believe that. I don't believe the Bible teaches it. I think classical apologetics and evidential apologetics are just a farce. I it's not. It makes no sense to me. So when I talk to Alan, I want to talk to Alan somewhat on his terms, in all honesty, not on biblical terms, but on his terms, because I want to know how he views the world. Does logic, uniformity of nature, do all of those things uh, continue to play a part? Faith, I want to find out about how he feels about faith, the nature of faith, the uh, origination of faith, a conscience, guilt, origins, things like that. Typical uh, arguments within the theistic atheistic debate. Um, so from here, what I want to do is I want to ask you, who were your top two or three or four favorite theologians when you were at Lift? I want to say at Lift only because, and I actually want to say at Lift post Journey Between the Veils, okay? Because that's when, it gave you time to really develop your personal theology, right? And it gave you time to really study the Bible and what is the Bible saying, word of God or not. It gave you time. So that's kind of what I want to know. All right. As opposed to, whether I don't know if you were, I assume everybody was at one time an Arminian dispensationalist, but I want to know, your most advanced form of Christianity for you. Who were your top three favorite authors? Two, three, four. And now, as an atheist, who are because I have some favorite atheists. Did you know that? I have some favorite atheists. I love watching atheists. I do. And I'm not talking debates. I can't stand William Craig debates. I cannot stand, or that Frank Turek guy. I cannot stand him because they just make me want to vomit because they have so much circular reasoning. I'm not saying I don't have that, Alan. It's just that when I watch them, I'm like, oh, you know how it is. If you were to watch them from when you were a, a believer, right? If you were to watch those guys, you would sit there and go, "Oh, dude, that's a terrible argument," because you were a presuppositionalist. So, again, top three, four favorite theologians at your most advanced theological state, and now, I assume you've been an atheist for how many years? Would you say?
It's been just about 5 years now.
Okay, so 5 years. So five.
4 or 5,
Okay,
something like that.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So give me your top three or four favorite theologians when you were an advanced Christian in your most advanced Christian stage, way before you started wondering, oh my gosh, it's, I'm talking when you were solidly
Yeah, I got you.
convinced, right? And then your top three or four favorite teachers now, your favorite atheists.
I got you. Before I do, I want to say, because something you said a little while back in your diatribe there was very, very powerful to me, and I hope everybody on the planet heard what you said, because it was very, very important. Nobody has ever been logicized into Christianity. Evidentialism doesn't do it. Classical apologetics doesn't do it. It's strictly faith alone. And if you're a Christian, you're going to say it's by grace alone, right? That to me is, and that's one of the reasons why I was willing to talk to you, because I know as a presuppositionalist, you're going to argue that way. And it frustrates me when I hear people and read books like Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, and they make this case, oh, I became a Christian because of evidence. Right. No, you didn't.
That's right.
No, you didn't. That's and I'm going to say it's a lie, because it is, but maybe he believes it. So I don't want to call him a liar because he believes it, I suppose. Right. But I think it's a trick. I think he already became a Christian and then saw evidence to support that and then started saying that that's what made. So I'm with you, and I appreciate that, because we are, as an atheist and a theist, can be 100% on the same page on that one thing at least. Yeah. That's a great start. All right. So to your question, my favorite authors, theologians, pastors, whatever, as a Christian, number one, top 1,000%, nobody will ever beat this guy, John Piper. He was my dude. He was my guy. Loved John Piper. I mean, bro, he changed my life. Just the whole concept of Christian hedonism, man. I tell you what, man, it was a revolutionary. So if you want to remain a Christian and you've never heard of John Piper, please go look at John Piper. I don't think you like him, if I remember correctly.
You are absolutely right.
I'm sorry to hear that, but it's okay, because I'm an atheist now, so you're welcome to dislike him. But as a Christian, my goodness, that I love him. Number two, I'd have to say R.C. Sproul.
He probably had a classical apologist.
He was a classical apologist, but I didn't like him for that. I got to say, I went with Bonson on that case. They had a great debate. Yes. Bonson 100% tore him up. Which just the concept of debating apologetics cracks me up, because I'm like, why are you guys debating apologetics? Obviously, neither one of you think the other one's proving God exists. So you're all falling short of this goal, and you're debating each other. It's just like, why don't you all work together to find something that does prove God exists? It's weird. Anyway, that's that. But yeah, so Sproul, he was my second when it came to just like general things. Like, he helped me become a preterist. Like, he was dope. I loved him. Let's see, who would have been my third? Boy, there were so many, but maybe, I mean, there's the old and great Jonathan Edwards and John Owens and those guys, and I read their books, and obviously John Calvin, and those are like the obvious ones. But maybe, and I would say J. Stuart Russell, because he also was a big factor in me becoming a preterist, a full preterist. But probably it's a toss-up between Michael Horton, because he wrote a book called, what was it called? The Law of Freedom. I don't know if you ever read that. But he talked about how the Ten Commandments spoke of the spirit of the law instead of just the letter of the law. And it was a very powerful book. So he was a good one, but it was a toss-up between him. And I got to say, man, probably Tim Martin and Jeff Vaughn writing Beyond Creation Science, because that was the one that took me over to Covenant Creation. Like, that book blew my mind, bro. And what ticked me off? Like, okay, so and I have a funny story here. I published Reading the Bible with the New Covenant Eyes, right? Literally released it. I think we're talking days, like 3 days. Michael Loomis, if you remember him, he was the one who created Preterist Radio, right? He comes to me and he starts talking to me about covenant creation and all this. And I'm sitting there with my jaw dropped, and I'm like, I hate you right now. I just released a book that argued about Adam being the first man. And I was so frustrated, because I was like, I just needed 3 days, bro. Seriously. And then I read the book because he recommended it, and boom, it was just like instantaneous. It just made all the sense in the world, because if you're going to end it with covenant, you got to begin it with covenant. It's just, for some reason that didn't click with me until Lewis talked to me. And anyway, I gave more than 3 or 4, I guess, but those are my guys, man. I just loved that journey. It was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
It was a lot. It was, and I miss those days sometimes. It was fun, like journeying and
Yeah, I hear you.
things. Even if you became the heretic and the world hated you, it was still fun. You always met new friends. You and me as a case in point. But yeah, so those are my guys. All right, so atheism. I would say right now my guys that I love are Matt Dillahunty. He is just awesome. I really, really enjoy him.
How do you spell that last name?
Dillahunty. Dillahunty, 2 L's.
Okay.
Then there's Forrest Valkai. Oh my goodness, dude, that guy will blow your mind. He's a scientist. He particularly biology, I think, if I'm mistaken, his specialty. But his channel is insane. Like, if you want to understand some things that you always just poo-pooed as a Christian, because I got to be honest, one of the things that I'm discovering as an atheist, when I was a Christian, when it came to things like evolution, Big Bang, singularity, stuff like that, that stuff's stupid. That's ridiculous. They don't know what they're talking about. God's word teaches us, blah, 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 right? And we just stuck by it. And we just literally shook the hand at anything that these scientists were telling us because they're just talking stupid. Bro, I got to tell you, man, if you just step back from that attitude that God's word is the only thing that's right, and you just listen to what they're actually saying, not what you think they're saying, this stuff is mind-blowing. It actually makes sense. It's not what we thought it was, dude. Like, I used to think the Big Bang was just this stupid idea that out of nothing, just some explosion happened and all this came in about. Bro, that is not the Big Bang Theory. Not at all. And not even close. But that's what I thought it meant. That because I didn't care to study it. It was just stupid to me. And now I've looked at it and I'm like, wow, it is totally different than that. That is not remotely what it teaches. So anyway, Forrest is just incredible. He's just opened my mind to so many things that I never understood. So I love those 2 guys. I will say Navabi, what's his last name? Navabi. Oh, geez, his name evades me. He's the atheist. He's got the atheist network, I think it's called. I can't remember it. Anyway, he wrote a book, totally amazing. 10 responses to Christian comments or something like that. I don't know. You caught me off guard. I can't remember, but I really loved his book. Amazing. Atheist Republic. I just came to me. Atheist Republic is his Facebook, or not just Facebook. It's like a whole organization where he helps people who have gotten out of Christianity. Although he didn't escape Christianity, he escaped Islam. And he's got a fascinating story. He actually tried to kill himself because he was afraid of what would happen if he died and faced God. It's like this whole story. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And then I'll just mention one more that I'm really into lately is Dan Barker. He's incredible. Really love his stuff. He just wrote a whole new book called Contradiction. He invented a word in philosophy, and it's quite fascinating. So anyway, I'll shut up. I spoke a lot.
I so appreciate it. And while I'm yakking right now, I'm going to yak a little bit. Can you see the chat box there over in
YouTube?
Yeah.
But I can jump on if you need me to.
Yeah, maybe, or actually if you could do it here in Zoom, that would be better.
I am in Zoom.
Yeah. So do you see the chat box in Zoom?
I do.
Okay. If you could just type in those names while I talk, and that way it'll be on the recording, because I do want people to see these names.
Oh, so just in Zoom. So forget.
Yeah, just in Zoom. Just in Zoom.
Okay.
So I'm going to give, if you don't mind, I'm going to give a little Yeah.
Sorry, which just the atheist ones?
Just the atheists. Just the atheists.
The atheist ones. Okay. All right.
Yeah. But I want to give a little Christian pitch just for a second here. For those of you who are wondering why I would allow, Alan to tell us about his favorite atheist, people, I am a devout Christian. That doesn't mean I am a goody two shoes. Yeah, y'all know me. I'm pretty authentic about my struggles. I'm going through a really dark phase in life right now where my mom is, you know, in very, very grave health. So, uh, I as a Christian, I believe the Lord is keeping me, he's continuing to give me joy and confidence in Him and His purpose and His joy and Christ. Um, but you may be wondering, why is He, why is He allowing an atheist? Well, the reason why is because of what Alan just had spoken about. I don't believe that his descriptions and articulating atheism is going to ruin your faith if you're a believer. That's why. Because I don't, and Alan knows what I'm talking about. I don't believe there it is, Matt Dilla.
And I forgot to mention Christopher Hitchens, so I just threw him in there, but that's okay.
Fantastic. I'm glad you mentioned him.
Yeah.
But yeah, just so you all know, I'm not worried about it, because if what we believe is true, if what we believe about God is true, that our faith is God given and that God is sovereign, like Alan said, look, he sees it in the Bible. Yes, God's sovereign, even though he doesn't believe that God is true. But as Christians, we need to kind of wake up and smell the coffee. Why should we be afraid of someone like Alan? We shouldn't. If we truly believe that God is sovereign and that our faith is real, listen to him. Take time to love him and hear his story. Seriously.
And may I also say that if you believe God is sovereign, you should also not fear questioning all the things that I'm suggesting you question. You should not fear reading a book like mine. You should be open to considering the possibility that maybe God doesn't exist. Because if he does, and he's sovereign, he's going to keep you if you're his child. And if you're not his child, he's going to drop you like he did me.
So you admit there's a God who dropped you.
Yeah, here you go. You got me.
Yeah, which of course, everybody's going to ask the question, how to kill God? Well, do you believe he's still alive? I know. You've probably gotten that a ton. Okay, so now I'm going to ask a question, and this is for my own satisfaction, because I know that not every professing believer on here believes the way I do. There are a lot of Pelagians. There are a lot of Arminians. There are a lot of Calvinists. There are a lot of, I'm sure there's some Unitarians, some Universalists, whatever, But from my perspective, this is sort of a friend-to-friend thing. And some of you who are watching, because some people don't, they like my preterism, but they don't even know about my soteriology, right? And then when they find out about it, or they believe they find out I believe in the deity of Christ, they're like, oh my gosh, off scouring. So here's my question for you. I began to really start to listen to atheists because I wanted to hear their story. I was in that weird place where a lot of Christians are, I won't even talk to them. I won't give them the time of day. Well, if you don't give someone the time of day, Christians, hello, how are you going to evangelize them? Paul said, I become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. So for me, not just because Alan is a dear friend and I love him to death, and I feel like we have so much camaraderie in so many areas, I love him enough to where I want to hear his story. Was I sad? Of course. Duh. Alan knows that. Alan knows that people are sad when someone leaves our perspective. I mean, imagine, he mentioned a guy, this Arvin Navabi. I'm sure his family members, when he left Islam, I'm sure they were terribly sad. But that doesn't mean they should kill him. I mean, that's just crazy stuff, and most Christians would agree. But they've loved this guy. They've cared for him, family members, and you're just gonna cast him off. You know, we don't do that. That's not what Christians do. We don't cast them off. I mean, if they start to get really hateful and belligerent and just like all they can do is just slam us. But we seek to love one another. And I know Alan believes the same thing. He wants to love people. We all want to love people, care for them, compassion. There's a proverb that says, what is desired in a person is kindness. That's not Christian. That's not non-Christian. That's what everybody desires. Everybody wants people to be kind to them. And when that happens, it's beautiful. It's just like a glorious flower, and it allows for stuff like what Alan and I are doing right now. Our beliefs are so polar opposite, but we are able to do what we're doing, and I love it. Okay. So this is for this is my self-pleasure. You know, it's like, Alan, I read an article in Time magazine years ago that was, I think it was what's the Christian guy, Collins? You know what I'm talking about?
I
I
don't.
can't remember. Anyway, very well-known guy, probably as well-known as Lennox.
You talking Jim Collins?
What's it?
Jim Collins?
It may be Jim Collins. I'm not sure. I can't remember his first name, but
Okay.
basically it was an article. I think it was definitely in Time magazine, but it raised some quotes about Einstein, who was by no stretch of the imagination a theist, but he saw order in the universe. Einstein absolutely saw order in the universe, and he was a determinist. Now, in the new atheism has gone through, it's morphed. As you know, since David Hume, it has gone through a huge change to where, and I think probably David Hume could have gone there were not Christianity so prevalent at the time in the 17 and 1800s, you know, in 1600, late 1600s. But he was surrounded by a lot of Christians and, and deists, guys like Voltaire, and they were on the edge, but Christianity was so pervasive that it was like, okay, how far can we go with this? But once Darwin came along and the late Romantic period, and certainly from an artistic viewpoint, the Impressionistic period, as it, well, I'm not going to get into that, but one of the things that's very fascinating to me is looking at the development of theology with the development of art, architecture, music. It's fascinating to me how it changed into what we call modern classical music and atonal music, and what we call in philosophical circles the age of uncertainty. I'm sure you probably heard of William Durant, the famous historian. He's got one volume called The Age of Uncertainty, the age of reason, the age of uncertainty. We as a result of Darwin, we entered into a period of uncertainty, great uncertainty, because we're like, what? I thought I was created by God. And now I'm finding out we came from apes. What am I going to do? The Catholic Church was freaking out. The Protestant Church was freaking out. And Romantics were obsessed with the supernatural. And people didn't know what to do. They just didn't know what to do. Well, finally, enter the modern era, enter the scientific revolution. Well, now we're up to this point in the 21st century where we are aware of neuroscience. You're familiar with Sam Harris, I assume.
Yeah. Also, another name I should have mentioned. Yeah.
Right. And I'm a huge Sam Harris fan.
You're a huge. Okay. That's shocking. But
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love seeing it.
Absolutely.
He's awesome.
We shouldn't be afraid of these guys. Christians, professing Christians, we should not be afraid of these guys. If you truly believe your faith is from God, you should not be afraid.
Yeah,
And
well,
if,
you like
what's
Sam
that?
Jordan Peterson's like, yeah, he
Oh,
drives me.
you know, I liked him a little bit at first. He totally sold out, and I just watched him. Anyway, yeah.
Dude, he doesn't even define God. Like half the time, I'm just like, what are you talking about, dude? Can you give me something of substance? Like, holy cow, he's all over the place.
Yeah,
Weird.
yeah, and it wasn't easy. Well, it was very easy to finally see the colors there. It's just, but I believe, I think it was great what he did up in Toronto with free speech, but his ideas about God are, yeah. Anyway, so Sam Harris, did you ever read his book, The End of Faith?
I did not read that one, no.
Okay, he wrote a book called The End of Faith, and Sam Harris is a brilliant guy. He's a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
And that was the end of faith. I mean, that was his thing. And honestly, I encourage every Christian to read it. And I plan, by the way, for those of you who are wondering, I plan on reading Alan's book. With everything I've been going through lately with my mom, it wasn't that I won't read your book. It's that with everything I'm doing, I'm continuing to try and put out material. I went through a really, really, what would I say, void season where I just lost a lot of ambition for doing anything. Ask my sons. They go, man, my dad is turning into a freaking out of shape dad bod, and I plan on getting back into things. But, we go through dark times. We ebb and flow. But I encourage every Christian to read The End of Faith by Sam Harris. I love, the Four Horsemen, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So every single one of the four horsemen, and this is where a lot of professing Christians are going to hate me. And we got to start to think about, but I want to give you about at least 10 minutes to share. Every single one of the four horsemen, Daniel Dennett, Christopher Hitchens, whom you mentioned, Sam Harris, and Richard Dawkins, every single one of them along with Einstein, deny the existence of free will. Now, Einstein was way ahead of the game. He was way ahead of the game. Now, a lot of the Puritans denied it. They didn't know how to word it. And some people just throw out the word free will like it's going out of style, but they don't really understand what they're saying. It's super common in professing Christendom. But for people who are philosophers, like you and me, and these four horsemen, and guys like Greg Bonson, but I still, even Bonson, I believe should watch his terminology. Here's my question for you. When you were a Reformed minister, again, post Journey Between the Veils, when you were a Reformed minister, you didn't believe in free will. Now that you're an atheist and you appreciate Hitchens and you appreciate Harris, both of whom deny free will, what is your perspective on will? What is your perspective on will? And how does that affect your worldview? And at that point, when you tell us what you believe, then sort of articulate, because we're going to start to open it up for questions here, okay, from the listening audience. How does that affect your view of ethics and morality in terms of absolutes? It's one thing to talk about atheism and ethics and morality from the position of free will. It's quite another, in my humble opinion. It's not so humble. Actually, I'm very prideful. But what is your estimation? How would you articulate ethics and morality if indeed you now, in science, I'm a science advocate. I am, for the most part. I'm a science. You know me. I believe in an old Earth. I don't think Genesis is talking about old Earth, young Earth, shape of the Earth, flat Earth, globe Earth. I don't think it's talking about any of that stuff. tell us real quickly how you currently view the will and how that affects your view of ethics and morality. And if you disagree with Harris and the Four Horsemen, tell us why. I know that's a lot. I'm so sorry. I know, and I didn't talk about that last night when you and I were conversing, but it was kind of like I wanted it to be raw and just kind of hear Alan Bondar's heart. Okay.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I appreciate the questions. So I would actually entertain free will the same exact way that I would as a Christian. I still take Edward's view. We do not have free will if you define free will as the ability to choose against your greatest desire. I think that's silly. I think it's ludicrous. Nobody can do that. It's impossible. I think a lot of Christians think they can, and that's why they call it free will. And they're always like, oh, well, God gave us free will. No. So I would stand with the Four Horsemen 100%, just like you would in this particular point. I think we always choose according to our greatest desire. I'm an Edwards fan when it comes to that. I still think that's the case. Nothing's changed. In how that affects morality and what was the other thing you said? Morality and what?
Ethics.
And ethics, yeah. I would say that nothing has changed either in regards to how I view those things than it was when I was a Christian. I would say to you that one of the greatest arguments against atheism that I see constantly is, well, you don't have an objective standard. You know, the whole argument. Oh, you have to have. So God's got to be some objective standard in order for there to be any morals. Listen, I get it. And when you're a Christian, you're brainwashed to think that way, and that's the only way you can think. You got to think there has to be an objective standard in order for there to be morals. That's just not true. It's just not the case. And here's why. First of all, as a Christian, the only reason God is your objective standard is because you decided that he was going to be your objective standard. Because the question would be, why do you think God is an objective standard that is worthy and good enough for you to follow? God is not you. You're the one making the decision to say, I'm going to follow this God as my objective standard. He's not objective then. He's subjectively your objective standard. You are deciding he's worth you following. So you have subjectively, as a Christian, decided that this God is going to be your standard, or his word of God, whatever it is that you're following, the Bible, the principles, whatever. So you still, as a Christian, are the one deciding that as an individual, what you're going to follow. There is no way that you can just say, well, no, because God's standard is his standard and we don't have a choice. Yeah, you do. You chose him. Simple as that. Even if it is grace and you go back to it, whatever, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is he's the objective standard you subjectively are following. Same thing goes as an atheist. We decide as individuals what standards we're going to follow. In Christianity, you choose God or his word. And the irony, here's the crazy thing. In Christianity, this supposed objective standard is a moving target. It's all over the place. You cannot find two Christians that will 100% agree on all the rules that God demands. Like, everybody's got different opinions.
Wait. Hold on. You and I did. No, I was kidding.
Yeah, right. No, we didn't. I guarantee you, we found something that say it's wrong to go to movies. It's wrong to play cards. It's wrong to smoke. For some people, it's wrong to, you name it. You know, porn is wrong in some place. Some people think it's okay to have sex before marriage. Some people, you name it, bro. You know it's like that. Like, it's all over the place because God isn't actually an objective standard. You subjectively decide what you personally are going to objectively make your law of life. And Christians happen to decide that there's enough agreement between them that they're willing to have their community and do some stuff. And really what it comes down to is within every local church, there's a certain set of rules, and you all just agree to follow these rules to become members of that church. That's just the way it is. So in much the same way as an atheist, I have certain standards that I think are important. I find people in my community that I think they're important, and it goes larger than that. Then we find people in our culture, in our society, in our state we want to live in, or whatever, and we decide I'm willing to abide by these objective standards because we are all willing to do that as citizens of this society. If I don't like it, I can get out of Dodge and I can move to freaking Africa if I want. Like, there's so many. I can go start my own island if I want. So nobody actually has an inherent universal objective standard. That's silly to even talk about, even as a Christian. You're lying to yourself if you think that's the case. It isn't. So everybody just decides what they're willing to abide by. You agree with it as a society, whether that be a local Christian society or a much broader society, and that becomes your objective standard. So we all have objective standards, but they're all subjectively agreed upon. And that's just the way it works. You decide what you want your standard to be. So when it comes to free will and how that affects it, I don't think anything has to do with some free will where I'm choosing against my greatest desire. No. My greatest desire is that I want to live. I want to be happy. I don't want anyone to hurt me. Therefore, it makes complete sense for me to do the same to people around me so that they treat me the same. And that's the kind of society I want. And that's how I dictate the laws that I'm willing to live by. That's how I decide my objective standard in the same exact way you do.
So do you believe, as we get near, we're 4 minutes away from accepting questions, do you believe that there is an objective love? Like the four great philosophical questions, I'm sure you're aware of them, but for our listening audience, I'll go over them. Is there a God? Is there life after death? What is the purpose of life? Okay, let me repeat that. Is there a God? Is there life after death? What is the purpose of life? And what is the validity of love? What is love? Love is a warm puppy. Yeah, kind of along those lines, that's very subjective. But do you believe that there is objectively a true love, a true form of love or exhibition of love? What define it, and is it objective or subjective to you?
Yeah, I don't think you can start with the question, is there an objective love? Because that's the equivalent to asking the question, is who is the creator of the universe? You're assuming creation to begin with. So anytime you start with a question that begs the question, so to speak, you're now demanding some. What's the philosophical argument again? Statement there. It's evading me. Anyway, you're making assumptions with your question to begin with that do not need to be there. So, when you start with who is the creator, I would start right off the bat and I would say, why do you assume a creator? Like that's a faulty question. So to start with objective love, I think that's a faulty question. Just like I do with objective standard. I'm like, why would you start there? So I would just say love is always subjective. In fact, I would probably roll with the famous statement, "Love is in the eye of the beholder." So I would just roll with that.
Beauty?
What's that?
Isn't that
Oh,
beauty?
I know it's beauty. Typically, I get that it's beauty, but I would change it to say love in the same exact way, because love and beauty are synonymous in my idea when it comes to discussing objectivity and subjectivity. You can't control in much the same way that Sam Harris, and I can't remember the exact same. I think he says, you can decide what you will do, but you cannot decide what you will decide to do. Something along those lines. I don't know if you're familiar with that statement. So the idea behind it is the decisions we make affect the decisions we will make. So the feelings we have at any given time are affected by things we do and our thought processes that lead up to that. So when I fall in love and I feel that love, it's subjective to me. What I feel is something different than what you feel. You won't feel the same feelings I have for my partner Ray as I do. And so therefore you can't define love as objective, because otherwise I would have to say, well, then you and I objectively love Ray the same way. No, we don't. And I certainly hope we don't. That would just be weird. So we can't objectively love in the same way. Everything is subjective when it comes to love. And it's based on previous things leading up to that, just like the will is. When I make a decision, it isn't like a light switch where I decide in that moment, I'm going to do this, even if it's against my will. No. The reason I'm doing this is because of all the things leading up to that cause my desires to choose a certain way. You always choose again according to your greatest desire. And I think you always love according to your greatest desire. And I'll just end it there because I know we're just about out of time. We may have to pick this up again.
Oh, Alan, absolutely. And I love you.
And I love you.
I do. I love you. I truly do. But we're gonna have to.
Dude, where's my car?
Your car? Hey, if it's gonna be anything, it's gonna be a Cybertruck, dude. No, now, now I'm not gonna. We're right on target. It's 6 p.m. and our wonderful Kirsten Brooks. She's so gracious. She's going to post uh, questions here to us, and please address the questions to either me or Alan. And if you don't pick me, I'll be hurt. No, just kidding. No, address them to either one. Uh, whatever the question is, please be respectful. Please no ad hominem attacks. Don't attack the person because there's too much to attack me about, and I wouldn't be able to defend myself. So let's attack the argument or question the argument. And remember, just to have a spirit of, and in my opinion, there's going to be objective love here. Have a spirit of love. Have a spirit of kindness, compassion. Alan and I care for one another deeply, and I plan on seeing him and enjoying him for the rest of my life anyway. And so, and I know some of you are saying, but man, Fenley, I've seen you behave in a bad way. You're a horrible person. And I know I can be. So I apologize for that. But let's try and keep our tone compassionate. So Kirsten, thank you so much. Do we have our first question?
Matt, while that's Matt. Anyway, Ward, while that's coming up, I don't see anything yet. So while it's that, I would just say, one of the nice things about being an atheist is with all of our screw ups and all the things that we do that's horrible, we don't have to worry about some guy that's angry at us or, his thing said thing was evil or whatever. I'm just like, yeah, I'm free. I'm good. There's no worries.
You mean you don't have to worry about being forgiven?
Exactly. There's no need for it.
And you don't have to worry about forgiving others.
Well, I mean, worry is a strong word. You're right. I don't. There's no worry because there's no judgment, so I can choose whatever I want. Now, I mean, so as an atheist, here's what I would say is, I can be a complete jerk and live a life where everybody can't stand me and I'm just an idiot and out there wreaking havoc or whatever, or I can try to be the best person I can be and make friends, and that benefits me more because I have more people in my life. So it's all about what's most benefit for me. And so in a way, I can call that hedonism. Like, I know a lot of people get scared of hedonism, but one of the things I loved about John Piper, if you recall, that I said earlier, was as a Christian hedonist, nothing changed. I just changed the object of my desire. It's no longer God, it's just happiness. And so I've realized that as a hedonist, I'm just trying to do what's going to make me the happiest. And contrary to a very popular Christian notion, atheists aren't out to eat babies because that makes them happy. That's just stupid. They have this idea that, oh my goodness, if you're just living for your pleasure, then you just do whatever you want, live it up and blah, blah. Okay. That is a very, very exaggerated idea. That's just not the way it works. As a hedonist, I want to live the best life I can live. I mean, I am only going to go around this thing once. So I want it to count, and I don't want to be on my deathbed and look back with regret. So I'm here to tell you, I want to have as many friends as I can have. I want to have a great relationship with my wife, with my partner. I want to have great sex. I want to be able to write great books. I want to benefit society because I want to be remembered. I mean, let's face it, 1,000 years from now, if they learn how to raise the dead, I want to be remembered. So, I want to come back. So, I mean, there's so many reasons why I would live to the best of my ability instead of just running around eating babies. You know what I mean? Like, so being a hedonist is not what people think. It is just truly a really good place to be. And there's no fear from some being out there that's going to destroy me if I make a mistake.
All right. So, Alan, we have some questions. I'm not sure. Kirsten is it. Can you hear me, Alan?
Yeah, I'm not seeing them. There's no questions coming through.
Yeah. So
I'm typing this first question, but it's really long.
Oh, okay.
Well, while she's doing that, I see a question I actually see a question, the first one, and this, I believe it is to Alan.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Let's see.
The only question I see was from Daniel Green.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Okay.
Here
Ward,
we go.
time out. Before you go into the one you just typed, somebody asked a question like an hour and a half ago. Do you want to answer it because it's written to you?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Do you see it, Ward? You should have a discussion with Andrew Wilson, something like that. Do you see that? From his YouTube channel called The Crucible.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I see one. I see a question for Kirsten. Just posted a question for Alan, but if you want to, if that one is before this one, this one is for Alan.
It's not so much a question as it is a statement. You should debate this guy. That's what he wrote. Okay, move on.
Okay.
Question for Alan.
Question for Alan. This is what I hear. See, in the framework of causality, where every entity that begins to exist requires a cause, how do you address, and you brought this up, Alan, how do you address the apparent singularity of the universe origin without invoking a causal regress or an uncaused first cause? Furthermore, if nothingness is posited as a precondition for the universe, how can the transition from a state of absolute non-being lacking properties, that you get the idea, Alan? I'm sure you do.
I think I get the idea of the question. I hope I answer it.
Yeah,
I hope
from Joseph O'Brien.
Right. Yeah. So I'll do my best to answer what I think he's asking. So what I would say is that in theism, at least Christian theism, the idea is that God is the first cause, right? Because he is infinite and eternal, and there was nothing that created him. But he had to be something that created everything. So a lot of times we'll ask the question, well, how do we, what's the eternal regress? Who created God then? If there has to be some designer, if God's the designer, then who designed God, and so forth. And the idea is no, but there has to be one starting point. And I would not necessarily disagree with that. There has to be one starting point, because I'm at this point, again, always at this point in my thinking, because I'm not omniscient. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've changed my mind on things so many times in my life, as you have, Ward, that I cannot ever say this is the absolute truth. All I can say is this is at this moment position, right? Like, so that's where I'm at right now. What I'm hearing from theists is there has to be an eternal being that has created everything and started all this. And what I would say is, I don't agree that it has to be a being, or at least an agent, nor do I think it has to be a creator. All I think there needs to be is something that has existed eternally. And in my mind, the way I see it, there is, and again, I'm basing this on what I can see from science, that there is zero reason to think that eternal thing cannot be energy or the universe existing as energy perpetually. We were able to observe it starting at the singularity. And the singularity, for those who don't know, which is really the Big Bang idea, is that energy as the universe was holding into this one little tiny squeezed thing for eternity, however long it's been. And so one of the things that people say is chance, the earth just came about by chance. What are the odds? 1.133 million odds, you know what I mean? Whatever the number is. And they say, well, that's ridiculous. It can never happen. Well, actually, if you give 1.33 billion chances a chance for 1.33 billion years, eventually it's going to hit. So if that's the case, and energy as the universe has been in the singularity for that long, at some point that's going to happen. And that's when the universe as we know it started to expand ever so slowly, but that's the first we were able to observe it. And so I would say that there is zero reason to think that is not just as likely and just as strong as a possibility. In fact, even stronger of a probability than God. And here's why. What we do know from science is that energy and the universe are both facts, 100% facts. So they're more likely to be the cause of the universe if, in fact, they can exist eternally, which there's zero reason to think they can't, versus God, where we have no facts for, just faith, which doesn't give us much to go on. So I stand by the universe as the answer, and I hope that that answers the question.
All right. Alan, looks like you're getting all the answers, man. What am I,
Yeah,
chopped
but it's because
liver?
we're on your show, man. You set me up, bro.
No, I swear. I mean, honestly, I only invited Christians. No, I'm kidding. No, I invited a lot of people. I invited some atheist friends, Christian friends.
Hey, I see one coming to you from Joseph in a minute, so let's get through these real quick.
Yeah, okay. Here's one here. From to Alan from John Mitchell. Was there ever a point that you fell in, he puts it in quotes, fell in love with Jesus?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if as much, if not more than Ward. I mean, I can only say if not more because I know his love is genuine too, and mine was. And Ward has already testified, knowing me, that, bro, I was in it 100%. Like, I wasn't lying. I wasn't like tricking everybody. I truly believe that I love Jesus with every single ounce of my being. So yeah, there was a time that I would have died for Christ. 100%. Yes.
All right. To Alan from Daniel Green. Danny, I love you, brother. Alan, do you believe in the afterlife?
No.
Okay. To Alan from Karen Rogers. Alan, who is the man, the myth, the legend?
Me.
There you go. All right. All right. And to Ward from Joseph O'Brien. Given that faith, and we're going to discuss this in our next we're going to discuss the nature of faith, Alan. I'm looking forward to it because I mean everybody has some sort of faith, and you know it's
Sure, for
it's
sure.
Yeah. But given that faith is often described as the belief in the absence or beyond empirical evidence, how do you conceptualize its epistemic role in affirming the existence of God? And that's a great question. It's a great question. My belief in God is based upon logic. Okay, I will say that. And I can go into some detail later that would require a lot, but I just logically I don't believe that conscience comes from nothing. I don't believe that thought, you know, when we talk about sensual experience or empiricism, it's based upon the five senses. But then we have this thing called thought. And thought is very elusive to, in my opinion, thought is very elusive to the atheist or the agnostic because we're having to explain something that can't be explained by virtue of the five senses, in my humble opinion. So that's a logic issue. Faith in Christ is a different story. I believe that faith is given by God, and that just as I cannot exercise my free will to believe in Santa Claus, I can't. I cannot believe in Santa Claus. It's impossible. If someone said, just exercise, you just need to be willing, come to Santa Claus, believe in him, exercise your free will right now. I ask all of you, can you exercise? Can you, with all your will, all your might, all your faculties, everything you know about life and what you've experienced, can you absolutely, positively, right now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, believe in Santa Claus? You cannot. The same is true with the resurrection. It's impossible. You cannot believe that a person, I'm not saying that it's impossible. So coming from, let's hypothetically say I'm an atheist. Hypothetically speaking, yeah. I mean, and Alan would agree with this too. I don't believe, I mean, this another, you know, this is for another episode, which we're going to have. Alan, I'm so excited about this, and I know you are too. If I ask Alan, do you absolutely, positively, 100% know that there is no creator? I don't think he would say, I absolutely 100% positively know that there's no creator. I don't think he would say that because he doesn't believe that he can prove it. He can discuss logic, he can discuss science, but he can't say with absolute certainty. So, likewise, I cannot say with absolute certainty, proof, that is, that Jesus rose from the dead. By faith, yes, I believe it. And that's where we have to discuss the nature of faith and the nature of knowledge. And there's this issue which all of you should study, which is called epistemology. Study epistemology. Dig into it. Okay, so that was the question. How do you conceptualize the epistemic role in affirming the existence of God? That's my answer. To Alan from Kirsten, our beloved transliterator. I don't know what you even call it. To Alan, the human eyeball is one of the most delicate parts of the body. We have eyebrows, eyelids, eyelashes, and a brow bone. And mine's exceptionally large. These are evidences that our eyeballs are protected. They serve a rational purpose and function. Don't you believe there must be some intelligence behind this creation?
Well, we also have blindness, and we have astigmatism, and we have what do you call those? What do you call me? Pink eye, and you name it. All kinds of things that happen wrong with the eye, as well as the rest of the body. So what I would say is, if in fact there is a designer, he did a very poor job at designing this thing. If in fact he is a God that is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, and does everything perfectly, he failed tremendously. And I would say that evolution makes way more sense of things like the eye when you see the fact that there are so many problems with the eye. What I see in evolution is there is a development of great things that have occurred, but there are flaws in the system. That's not evidence, in my opinion, of a designer. That's evidence of evolution. That makes way more sense to me.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
So then, are you more impressed with the eye or more disappointed in the eye?
I'm impressed with the fact that the eye is as great as it has become through evolution. Very impressed. But I don't think you need a designer for that, especially with the flaws. I mean, seriously, dude, you got to ask, like, if God designed this thing, then why did he screw it up for so many people?
Okay, but you would agree then that you're more impressed with it than you are disappointed in it.
Sure.
Okay. To Ward from Vladimir Pandovsky, God bless you. I appreciate you. He's an awesome guy. I've never met him, but he said some wonderfully encouraging things to me. Schopenhauer found escape from suffering induced by the unsatiated will, by immersion in beauty, especially in music. Can postmodern atonality deliver this? He gave the examples of John Cage and Karl-Heinz Stockhausen.
Well, I'm glad this is your question.
Yeah. So, well, as a musician, I am well aware of what is called atonal music or serial music. I shouldn't say or, I should say and or serial music. And that goes back to what I brought up when I addressed the age of uncertainty. So, and this is something that I will bring up when I talk to Alan later. He's talking about beauty. And the question is basically, if I'm reading you right, Vladimir, it boils down to this. Is there we've talked about objective ethics, objective morality, objective conscience, right? Whether there's objective guilt, objective innocence. This boils down to, is there objective beauty? And Vladimir asks a great question, because if you take 1,000 atheists and 1,000 Christians and you set them on the coast of uh, the Nepali coast in Kauai, and you ask them to look out at the sunrise or the sunset and to look behind them at those gorgeous uh, ridge like ascending ridges, uh, do you think that's beautiful? Every single one of them, or at least the vast majority of them, right? And this goes back to kind of Alan's statement. Well, if I don't like it here, I'll go to Africa. Uh, is that beautiful? I would venture to say every single one of them would say yes. There might be a couple who, and this is me, and this is probably presumptuous and might even sound offensive. But there might be two, and this happens among Christians too, so we have to be careful, who would just deliberately oppose for the sake of being oppositional, right? But I would venture to say that if you placed me and Alan at the top of Mount Whitney in Southern California, and we looked around, we both would say, this is gorgeous. If you placed us on a beach in Kauai or the Bahamas, we both would say it's gorgeous. If you placed us here in Page, Arizona, which, Alan, I hope you come and visit me sometime. I came and visit you, you stuck up, conceited bastard. Anyway, but I hope you do come and visit me sometime. I would love it. I would absolutely love it. And anyone else too. Alan and I would look at it the same way. Now with music, it's slightly different. Okay, Vladimir, it is slightly different. Because some people like Kanye. I don't. Some people don't like Bach. I do. And so there is a little more objectivity in musical beauty. But in regard to your question, the age of uncertainty has produced atonal music, which makes no sense to the Western mind, the Western Renaissance mind, right? I'm talking, post-medieval era. Atonal music makes no sense to us. But if you listen to Eastern music, it still maintains, even though there's microtones. So this gets kind of theoretical. There's still tonality. Seriously. In all of the Eastern music I've ever listened to, and Middle Eastern music that I've ever listened to, that is unaffected, or at least seemingly unaffected by Western. I mean, we've affected everybody now. If you go to India or go to your average Asian restaurant, they're playing music with Asian lyrics, Japanese, Chinese lyrics, but it's totally Western influenced. Okay. So it's kind of hard to do that. But anyway, I would just say, Vladimir, that the vast majority of people, I believe, all over the world would say that atonal and serial music, if they weren't caught up in the facade and virtue signaling mentality, oh my gosh, I was a music major, of that advanced degreed society, they would all say it's garbage. It's atonal music is absolute garbage, but it works great for horror movies. Okay, now I got some more questions here. I know. Now remember, Alan, don't get mad at me because you keep calling us brainwashed, and I have a bone to pick with you about that. All right. To Alan from, let's see. Hold on. To Alan from Karen Rogers. How was Alan hurt by the Jesus he loved? That's a good question, actually, because I plan on talking about that. How was Alan hurt by the Jesus he loved?
Well, that's a very odd question because I don't believe the Jesus I loved exists. So I wasn't really hurt by him at all.
Well, maybe I'll add to it. Are you angry at God?
No.
Okay. So when you say, and everybody wants to know this, how to kill God the easy way, are you saying, I know what you're saying. Okay, I do. Are you saying that God exists and you've got to somehow uh, stop his existence or prove that he doesn't exist, even though you think he exists?
No, no, I think God is an idea that's been placed in our heads, which is why I refer to the term brainwashing. And I think that once you recognize that he's nothing more than an idea in your head, it's simple to no longer believe in him. So when I talk about killing God, I'm talking about him in the same way that Nietzsche did. Nietzsche didn't think God was a real God. He just thought that the ceasing of belief in God, which doesn't actually exist, would cause nihilism, and that's a whole different subject. And I deal with that in my book as well. But that being said, no, it's an idea, and so I'm not talking about killing some real being. If I was, that would be considered a threat, and I'm pretty sure I'd be in jail already.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to find here because there are some more questions. Okay. I don't know who he's addressing this to, but again, this is Joseph O'Brien. If faith functions as a non-empirical mode of knowing, what criteria, if any, distinguish valid faith-based claims from those that are contradictory or mutually exclusive?
Okay, first of all, I don't know who this question is to, but secondly, I don't see it on my screen for some reason.
I know you don't because it wasn't posted, nothing was, and so that's why I'm now looking at YouTube. So,
Oh.
but no, here's another one. Okay, to Alan Bondar from Rick Welch. Rick, hi.
Hey, Rick.
I
What's
know
up,
Rick.
man?
I know Rick.
Love this guy.
Does Alan consider spirituality part of the evolutionary process?
No, I don't. I don't believe in spirituality. Personally, I don't. I don't think there's a spiritual realm. I don't think there's anything of that sort. Now, here, so I want to be cautious here. Okay, so I'm going to back up. Let me back up. I understand that there are people who define spiritual differently than I do. You and I, Ward, we come from a background where spirituality or spiritual means a very specific thing. So when I think of spiritual, I think of a realm. I think of angels and God and the Holy Spirit, and, things of that, whatever, demons. That's spiritual realm for me. So I instantly cringe when I hear those concepts because I don't personally believe in a spiritual realm. I don't think any of those things exist. So if you're asking me if I believe that those things play a part of the evolutionary process, then obviously I must say no. There's no question. I would say no, definitely not. Some people define spirituality like you go out for a walk in the woods and you have this really powerful experience and you feel real good and you come back and you're like, man, I just got really relaxed. That was such a spiritual experience. Okay. People use it poetically like that. I'm cool with that. I don't love it because, again, I think we should use terms that mean certain things and not like I don't like personally when people use God to refer to energy because energy is energy and God means something entirely different. They're not the same. So when people use them synonymously, I think it creates a lot of confusion. And so if we're having a dialogue and you're using God and I'm meaning energy and you're meaning God and I'm meaning energy, it becomes very convoluted and you can't really have a clear conversation until you clarify terms, which those terms should already be clarified if you just use the terms we use. So if you're using spiritually poetically, let me think. Would I say that that's a part of the evolutionary process? I mean, maybe. I mean, I guess because at least socially, social evolution, I would say that would play some sort of a part in that. Maybe the other, maybe biological evolution too. I don't know. That's a very difficult question. So I'm going to assume he means spiritual realm, and I'm going to say no because that's the best answer I can give. If he means poetically, that's a tricky question, something I'd have to ponder some more.
Okay. Here's a question that I'm looking at on YouTube. It's nice that there's no delay. This is from Dante Mariano Jr. Can Alan say what the most basic tenant? I think he meant tenant. Tenant is someone who rents an apartment building. Tenant, Tenet, is a bullet point in a belief or one of the statements of belief. So I think that's what he meant. Can Alan say what the most basic tenet of Christianity is? What would you say? That's a good question, actually. And I know I don't know that. Well, actually, because sometimes things change. Alan, what is the basic tenet of Christianity?
That is a tough question. The basic tenets of Christianity. Well, he's asking me, so I'll tell you what I would have thought it was. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say three things, but they're all combined into one sentence: grace alone, through faith alone, and Christ alone. I would say that is the number one tenet of Christianity.
Grace alone, faith alone, Christ alone. Okay. Yeah. And that's wonderful. You know me, I'm a Christian. Let me read. Okay. This is from Kirsten. This is in regard to your testimony with Derek Lambert. You said you poured your heart out to God so many times and you couldn't feel him. And this kind of it sounds like it's related to what I was asking you is when you were at since Journey Between the Veils, but still at Lift Church, were you experiencing cognitive dissonance? And so what she says here, you said you poured out your heart to God so many times and you couldn't feel him. You couldn't sense a presence, and you decided no one was there. Is that one of the reasons you left Christianity? That's a fair question.
Oh, totally fair. And I mean, I'd be hard pressed to say that it had nothing to do with it, because it probably did. Because an invisible, non-present God is the equivalent to a non-existent God. So, sure. I mean, if he wasn't there, then it was probably very likely. And I say that because it's very hard to pinpoint every single thing that had any bearing on me leaving Christianity. There's a lot of factors, a lot, just going back years, even though I didn't recognize it years beforehand. But there were so many factors. So I am sure that this played a part to me saying, I wonder if there's even a God. You know what I mean? Like that. Surely it raised questions. Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, I just want to say, I love Joseph O'Brien too, and I really hope that we can get that question he asked earlier, because I haven't seen it come through, but I would love to answer his question.
So let's answer it
later. But he's such a great guy. I want to make sure I answer his question too.
Yeah, answer. I must have missed it. Go ahead.
Hey, Alan, that question. Sorry to interrupt. That question that you want to know, it's at the very, very beginning of the chat.
Very, very beginning from Joseph O'Brien.
Yeah, I think so.
I just don't. I see from Joseph O'Brien, but I see no question.
Okay. I'll have to go back and look for it again.
Okay. Well, take your time. If you get to it, we'll answer it. Kirsten also asked an important question. The fact that a male has a penis and a female has a vagina, and they just happen to connect, and secretions come out of the male into the woman and produces a baby. How can that kind of design come from randomness, chaos, and chemicals when there is an obvious design? And I understand that question, but I guess I would say to respond to that is, it is interesting to note that there are species that produce asexually. So if you're going to argue that a male and a female working together is this design, then what about the asexual ones? So I just don't think that that's a great argument to say that some designer existed. That actually, to me, is the stronger argument that evolution happened, that every species evolved and adapted according to what it was necessary for it to survive. Some asexually, some sexually with the opposite being. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't prove design in any way, shape, or form, because there's multiple ways to produce, not just the way humans do.
Hey, real quick, Kirsten, I'll let you and Alan do this. I have to use the restroom, being authentic here. So take it away.
Oh, we got the question from Joseph O'Brien. Awesome.
That's a different one.
Oh, it's a different one. Okay, good. Because that last one sounded really hard and I didn't want to answer it. Okay, here we go. If we are the result of random impersonal processes with no inherent meaning, why do humans seem to universally seek purpose, meaning, or a sense of significance? I mean, I think what you're asking essentially is what's the meaning of life? Like, why would I care to seek any sort of purpose if I'm an imperson, if I'm created as a process, or not created, if I'm just a random processing? I don't know. It's a strange question for me because all I can say is I am here and I have a brain and I like to think that I have purpose in life and do something before I die. More so, I want to live the best life I can while I'm alive. So I I would say just because we like to have meaning. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm following the question really. It's because first of all, I don't think it's just random impersonal processes with no inherent meaning. Like, I mean, I guess it is. I don't know, Joseph. That's a great question. It's tricky, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like saying, just because we're created by some intelligent designer, why do we care to live with meaning? I mean, we could just as well give the finger to God and be like, well, I don't really care, which some people do, I suppose. So I don't know. I just think while I have a brain, I feel what I feel. I feel like I want to have meaning, and so I give it the meaning that I feel I want to have for this life. Hopefully that answers the question. It's a tough question. It's a good one, man. Good question.
Did you already answer the one from, I'm sorry, Joseph O'Brien?
Yeah, I totally tore it up, man. Completely, utterly destroyed his question. No, honestly, it was a tough one. That was a really good question.
Okay. And maybe you already answered this one.
Yeah, Board, I tell you what? Can you read the question? Because I'm curious, just for you to objectively stand back for a second and pretend like you're an atheist and think about this question, because this is a good one. It's the last question that you see on your screen there. Just look at it and tell me what your thoughts are on that. It's a good question.
The one I see is, if we are the result of random, impersonal processes with no inherent meaning, why do humans seem to universally seek purpose, meaning, or a sense of significance? And my answer would be, and obviously, as a Christian, I'm going to use the Bible, but also my personal experience. This boils down to whether the conscience evolved or was created. And this is a question I ask, and I wanted to get to this with Alan, but I think we're going to talk about it in detail in our next conversation. Lord willing, that happens. But here's the question I ask every atheist, every agnostic, everyone who is on the fence about a philosophical worldview of good and evil, or right and wrong, or love and hate. So that's one of the reasons I asked the question to Alan about love. Is there objective love? It's very related to objective ethics, morality, and it's very related to objective matter. I know that sounds strange. Does matter exist objectively? Does conscience exist objectively? Does light exist objectively? Does morality exist objectively? Does goodness, does beauty, back to Vladimir's question, does beauty exist objectively? These are all incredibly important questions because we are a world and we talk about universal. We use the word universal. The word universal is incredibly important. We live in a universe. Are there things that are universally true? I would argue yes. So if I walked up to anyone in the world, all 8 billion people, I walked up to them, and if they have their five senses, if I walked up to them and I pinched them on their spare tire, oh, wait, maybe not everybody has one of those. Sorry, that was subjective. If I walk up to them and I pinch them in a place that is really tender on their titty, do a titty twister like guys used to do to each other or whatever, I pinch them. I do something that makes them hurt. They're all going to be mad at the same time. They're all going to be angry. They're going to turn around and go, what the heck? What is going on? That is universally and absolutely true that they will dislike it and oppose it and not want you to do that. And if at that point you ask them, is it wrong or is it proper or is it good for them to do that? They're going to give you the same answer. Is it wrong? Okay. Yes, it's wrong. Say they don't like the word wrong because that presupposes a moral absolute. Is it good? Again, same thing. Presupposes a moral absolute. Is it proper? That's debatable. Is it appreciated? Universally, everyone will say, no, it is not appreciated unless you are into BDSM, which I know Alan is really a fan of. That. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, no jokes, man. No jokes.
No jokes. But no, just trying to keep it lighthearted. Everyone universally will say that they do not like it. They don't appreciate it. Okay, unless there's something going on. Okay, so that's very important for us to understand. So when he asked the question, if we're the result, why do humans seem to universally seek purpose, meaning, or a sense of significance? And that's a very important question. Why, like for instance, why are Alan and I here? Alan truly believes that his view is right. It's correct. And he truly believes that his view is so correct that he wants it to be objectively correct for everybody else. Let's think about it. He wants it to be objectively correct for everybody else. Otherwise, he would not have written his book. He would not be arguing this if he did not want it to be objectively correct for everybody else. He would not be here. Same is true with me. If I did not want everybody to worship Jesus, I wouldn't be here. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Being a Christian has caused so many problems for me, so many empirical trials. Seriously, I'm going through one right now. Just several. A stuff load of them. So I think Alan would agree with me. If he did not want what he believes to be objectively agreed upon, he would not be here. Let's just be honest. Is that stating the truth? Because if Alan says, no, I don't want it to be appreciated objectively, if he says that, then what he's saying is there are some people I do not want to be, there's some people I do not want to believe what I believe. In other words, there's some people I really want to stay brainwashed. No. Like speaking from his perspective to professing Christianity, Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, and all its factions, he would be actually defeating his purpose if he said he did not want it to be objectively agreed upon from those three factions: Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, and Protestantism. Alan, I'll let you respond.
Well, I would agree 100%, proving my point that objectivity is not based on some supernatural being, but personal value. So thank you for making that point.
So would you agree that you want people to objectively agree with everything you wrote and How to Kill God the Easy Way?
Sure. Just like you want everybody to objectively believe that God is the supernatural being of the universe that started everything. Sure. But you have a personal value in that. I have a personal value in mine. So objectivity isn't genuinely objectivity. It's based on personal value, which we determine what we want to be objective. So you've made a great point. And I think it supports my position and the point you just made. 100%. Yes. Well done.
And I would like to say there's this gentleman on the YouTube, Wesley Curry II. I think both Alan and I, even though I don't know if Alan's looking at it, would objectively agree that you are such a profound nuisance. So if you want to actually ask a good question, feel free.
And I'm a profound nuisance.
No, not Alan. No, this guy, Wesley Curry II.
Oh, he's a profound nuisance? I thought he was saying I was.
No. This guy is just like,
that's funny.
Spouting. He's a troll.
Ward, I have. There's a question in here that's for me, but I want you to answer it on my behalf because I really think this will be a very potent answer if you answer it for me.
Okay.
It's from Karen Rogers. I know the Jesus I love. Maybe Alan never knew Jesus. Sounds that way if he says Jesus doesn't exist.
Right. And as a believer, and you know how I'm going to answer this, Alan, you know exactly how I'm going to answer, because you used to believe in eternal security. You used to believe in Jesus. You used to believe in eternal security. You used to believe that faith was the gift of God.
Well, yes, you're saying that I used to believe because I agree with you. She's saying I never believed.
No. What I'm saying, and so I'm saying that's what you used to believe.
Sure.
Right? You used to believe it.
So at one point, I actually did believe in this Jesus.
That's right.
Contra her statement.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, and I don't want this to sound offensive to you, Alan, but I'm just going to state what I believe. Let me ask you this. You want me to answer the question? Now I'm going to turn around because she directed the question to you. Now I'm going to turn back to you. How do you think I'm going to answer it?
That is a difficult one. I think
wait, hold on. It's not difficult. I want you for just 1 second to transport yourself, beam yourself up, Scotty, beam yourself down to your Reformed perspective. If someone abandoned the faith, what would you say about their faith and position?
Well, the reason I said it was tricky is because it would be one of two possibilities, really. I would say either they were deceiving themselves this whole entire time and they weren't saved to begin with, or they will end up in eternity because God will either call them back or they're saved either way because sin is not keep anybody from eternity because grace covers it all.
But as a reformer, could someone lose their salvation?
No.
So if they walked away, was their faith real?
Depends. Because
from a reform perspective.
Yeah, from a reform perspective, you can either have been deceived yourself the whole time, and you never were saved to begin with. But if you genuinely were saved, then you will eventually be in heaven. You will come back to Christ. You can't possibly live forever without going to eternity with Christ. That's the reform.
But if it's God-given faith, will that, from a reform perspective?
Well, if it's God, if you're actually clarifying, saying it is absolute God-given faith, and no, there's no way I can lose my salvation. I will be in heaven with the rest of y'all.
Right. So in other words, from a Reformed perspective, and what I believe is a biblical perspective, even though I'm not Reformed to the extent of the word Reformed, First John chapter 2 says this: they went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt, this is First John 2, 18 and 19. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have continued with us.
Right, which is
But
the
they
other.
went out from us that it might be made clear that they were not all of us. So I would say that Alan was never a true believer. Now, of course, as an atheist, they would look back on that and I know I was a true believer. I know I was. And so I would say, from a faith perspective, a faith-based biblical perspective, I would say that Alan was never a true believer. And that's not meant to disparage Alan, because that's a faith-based response that's based upon what I see in the scripture. Okay. So
Well, first of all, it's not disparaging at all, because number one, is the least bit concern of mine that I'm not going to heaven. But the other side of it is, how do you know that God's not just taking me through a valley and will eventually bring me back? You don't know that.
that's a good point. But the way I know that is that if faith is the gift of God, you would never unbelieve.
Sure, you would. I've seen tons of stories of people that fell away from the faith for a time, and then God brought them back, and they became the greatest evangelists of all.
What I mean is they were never initially a believer if they fell away. According to First John, and what I believe is true in the rest of Scripture. In other words, at the time they returned. So, for instance, let's say you return. Let's say hypothetically, you return and
Okay.
you believe in Jesus Christ, and you continue to believe in Jesus Christ for all eternity. It was at that point that God gave you faith, that the previous, what you thought was faith, or even what you thought was the gift of faith, that was just a misconception in your mind. So, like you say, we're brainwashed, right?
Yeah.
And which I don't know, brainwashed, the word. So I don't use the word brainwashed when I speak with atheists, because it carries a connotation of stupidity. Okay, it does, and so I don't use it with atheists.
Well,
Or
I think that's because you have a misconception of brainwashing. Because nobody who's brainwashed knows they're brainwashed. It's not like I'm believing something on purpose that I know is wrong. That would be
exactly, exactly,
my
and
point with brainwashing is, you believe something not because you know it's wrong and you're believing it anyway. It's because you think it's right, and that's why you believe it. There's a total difference between the two. So you're not stupid for it,
right.
and then you perform. You're just
Well,
convinced,
and
right, and
now I was planning. Let me just say this. I was planning this for the next episode, but maybe we can cover it here in a short amount of time, because I'm looking at the questions.
yeah,
I
we're
just
supposed
want to make.
questions. Maybe we should just wait till next one and just answer these questions, because this sounds like a whole fucking whole
It is. It is. This is a good one. And we'll address it next one.
Yeah.
I know. Let's see. Maybe. Okay, Joseph. We're random. Okay. From Rick Welch, another one. Great point in regard to defining terms, Alan. In evolution, as the human departed. Okay. In evolution, as the human departed the primates, they began to question their existence. Oh, okay. I see where he's going with this. In evolution, as the human departed the primates, they began to question their existence that developed into religious thought. Is this evolving?
Absolutely. And at the time, it was the best answer that we had. Now we understand things far better with evidence and science, so it's time to abandon that thought, just like we would have with other thoughts that were wrong. But at the time, yeah, 100% best answer we had.
Okay. Hold on, but I'm seeing some other questions here. This is from Vladimir again. Ward, have you heard about Tyler Velas' apostasy and his problem with the hiddenness of God through his life's trials? Thought about his experience. No, I haven't, but I would love to direct that to Alan because I think that that's very important. Let me read it again, Alan. This is from YouTube. This is from Vladimir Pandovsky. Have you heard about Tyler Vela's apostasy and his problem with the hiddenness of God through his life's trials? In other words, gosh, life sucks. God, there's no way God could exist.
Yeah, I don't know who Tyler Velas is actually, or his apostasy, but I think I understand the question. Maybe that when you go through life, it almost reminds me of uh, the dark. What is it called? The
Dark Night of the Soul.
Dark Night of the Soul. Thank you. I couldn't think of the second word. Dark Night of the Soul. Yeah, it sounds like that. Like you're going through trials, and when you're going there, God seems hidden, and so that can create this apostasy. In fact, it's almost very similar to the question before it that Kirsten. I keep saying her name wrong, and I apologize, Kirsten. That Kirsten asked, and I'm going to read that question because I think it's the same question, if I'm not mistaken. Alan, from your interview, it sounds like you endured some trials regarding your belief in full preterism. I'm not sure if you got kicked out of a church, if I can remember correctly. So do you think that contributed to your erosion of your belief in God? So similar idea, like do the circumstances surrounding these painful experiences where you didn't feel God's presence, and there was another question earlier I asked about that, is that kind of what's causing or caused your departure from the faith? I'm hoping I'm entertaining this question correctly. And my answer in a lot of ways would be no, specifically to Kirsten's question, because my losing my jobs as because of full preterism were years before I even contemplated atheism. So that wasn't even remotely in the ballpark. In fact, those times just did nothing but motivate me harder to live for Christ. So no, I would not say that had any erosion of my belief in God. Um, but as far as the hiddenness of God, similar to the question earlier, would not feeling God's presence be the reason or a cause or a assistance, so to speak, of you leaving the faith? As I said earlier, I am certain that probably, I shouldn't say certain and probably together, that kind of doesn't make sense, but I'm sure that it did contribute to some extent because, as I said earlier, the hiddenness of God is the equivalent of a non-existent God. So, I mean, if God doesn't exist, he doesn't exist. So he can hide all he wants. And until he comes to me and reveals himself to me, I have no reason to believe in him. So my question to theists constantly now is, you believe in God? Great. Help me believe in God. If God actually exists, give me some reason to believe. And if all you're going to say is, well, I can't prove it, I can't prove anything, I just believe because of faith. Well, that doesn't do me any good. So when people tell me we turn back to God, well, what does that mean? Are you asking me to fake it? You asking me to pretend like I believe in God so that I don't endure some suffering and judgment? Well, that's not going to work because I'm pretty sure God knows my heart, so that's not real. So I'm not sure how a theist can possibly persuade me that God exists and that I should turn my life back to him when they themselves have no reason to believe other than faith. If it's just faith, well, how does that help me? Because it's your faith. So there's nothing else I can do but say, well, fine, then until God reveals himself to me, here I am.
Yeah. Well, we are 2 minutes from really the end. I wanted this to be about a 2.5 hour. I won't call it an ordeal. Honestly, this is a 2.5 hour blessing, Alan. I've just
An
no,
ordeal.
yeah, no. It's a 2.5 hour blessing for me, and I just appreciate you being. There are a lot of comments on here. Actually, I'm seeing them from Christians that are, and I understand. I understand. Okay. But there are Christians on here who are being rude, cynical, sarcastic. I've been there. I know what that's like. I do. And as you go back and look at this, Alan, on their behalf, I apologize to you, um, as I did for the way I treated you before. Alan, again, I know probably people probably think I'm gay for saying this. I couldn't give a rat's ass about those
I'll
people.
beat you to it. I love you.
I love you too. I deeply love you, and I apologize on their behalf because you know where they're coming from, and you know it's easy. And atheists do it too, of course. I've experienced ruthlessness from atheists and professing Christians, and I
That's
say professing.
This isn't a theist versus atheist issue. This is a human issue.
Exactly. It is a human issue.
Yeah.
And if you go back, you'll look at some of these comments, and they're not representative of you know it. You'll look at them, and you'll say that is not what Jesus taught. Jesus was very clear. He said, you know, turn the other cheek, whatever anyone wants to mean. A lot of Christians want to, distort that and say, well, that was for back then, the time statements. And preterists are very big on and on almost relegating kindness and love because of their preterism. And I know I've been there too, and I've tried to do that. But the more and more I look at the scripture, the Old and New Testament, I realize that kindness and love are issues that, if God exists, right? If Jesus has said what is true, it's going to make a world of difference to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's going to make a world of difference. And I think that's what you and I are doing, Alan. And I hope that more Christians and I would do that in our conversations, that we would be kind and not say things that are deliberate. I think that's the issue here, that are deliberately demeaning or condescending or conniving or digging. We all do that as humanity. We all kind of want to dig, and how can I make him feel miserable? We're not called to make people feel miserable. We're called to comfort one another and care for one another. And if Alan, oh gosh, I'm going to get all emotional here. But listen, if we love Alan, if we truly love Alan and we're worried about his soul or whatever, well, aren't we going to care for him and treat him kindly? I mean, Jesus said, they will know you are my disciples by your love for one another. Whether Jesus is true or not, as Christians, we believe he's true. And if we believe that, we're going to love Alan, we're going to love one another, and we're going to love Alan's friends, and we're going to care for them. And I'm working on it, folks. I suck. I fall short every day, and I have to just back up, and then I have to humbly apologize. And apologizing is so hard because it's admitting I blew it as a Christian, and we're supposed to be the exemplary people of the world. And so, Alan, if you see crap on here that is hurtful, I apologize for them. I love you. We're going to do this again, and I hope that people would continue to join us. We're going to talk about the nature of faith. We're going to talk about the origin of conscience, good, evil, tree of life, tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Alan, give us your last words. First, I want to tell you, tell us about your website. Tell us about your books. Tell us which ones are true, which ones are not true, which ones have full truth, which ones don't have full truth. Give it all to us, because I want people to know you like I have known you, and love the kind person that you've been to me.
All right. Before I do, am I lagging or can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you totally clearly.
Okay, because for a while there you were lagging on my end, and I just didn't want to spend a lot of time talking if nobody could hear me. So just to wrap it up then, first of all, I just want to say thank you. This was more than delightful. I mean, honestly, this is the first live discussion of any sort verbally that I'm having with any Christian publicly. So this is way cool for me. thoroughly enjoying it. I love being challenged. These questions are great. So, I have to continue to learn and grow too. So this is really, really wonderful. And I think the next discussions we're going to have are going to be a blast. So I'm very much looking forward to that. To answer your questions though, to close this out, my website, howtokillgod.com. You can go there. From that page, you can see other communities that you can go to if you're an ex-Christian and you're looking for a community to be a part of. There's that there. You can get my books from there. There's a link to get it off Amazon. You can also get autographed copies if you're interested. There's merchandise you can get, but I encourage you to read the book first, because the merchandise is funny based on a portion of the book, but it doesn't make sense until you read the book. So anyway, read the book and then you'll actually laugh at the merchandise. But that's all that. As far as the books, all of them are true. It just depends on what you mean by that. I still think reading the Bible with the New Covenant eyes and Journey Between the Veils are two of the best explanations of the Bible you will find. I think they're completely accurate. And I think if your goal is to understand the biblical narrative, you can't go wrong with these books. Do I think that they're teaching that the Bible is a true story? No, obviously. That's the point that Ward and I have done this whole night. Clearly, I'm an atheist, so I do not believe that that's doing that. But if you believe the Bible is true, you can't go wrong with these books, especially Journey Between the Veils. It's very, very interesting, and it goes completely contrary to orthodoxy. It, in my opinion, proves that the body of Christ was destroyed at the ascension, which is a really fascinating and kind of earth-shattering view for a lot of Christians. But that's that. The most truest book, though, that I would say is true to life, not just based on a fictional story, is How to Kill God the Easy Way. You can either find it on Amazon or you can, like I said, go through my website. But that is my journey out of Christianity, and it takes you on the same journey, removing the brainwashing word that Word doesn't like yet. But I think we'll resolve that in episodes to come by definitions. But that's the idea behind the book. But that's it. That's all I got for tonight. We got to let people go. But boy, did I enjoy this. This was a ton of fun, Ward.
Oh, it was absolutely a blast. And I just appreciate you so much. And I have a feeling we're going to be nicer to each other online. But some final words, some final words for people who are online. Don't be a bully behind the screen. It's easy to do because it's just binary. It's just binary. It's just black and white. It's characters on the screen. But remember, Alan's a real soul and I'm a real soul. And we're trying to be kind. We're trying to live what we believe is going to be courteous and helpful to society. From a Christian point of view, we're trying to emulate Jesus. From Alan's point of view, he's just trying to do what he believes that is going to be the most conducive for the propagation and perpetuity of society, so that they can last and not kill each other. Okay. And both of us want that. But I just want you all to know I love Alan with every fiber of my being. And again, my apologies to everybody if you saw me being mean online. I'm going to try to be nice. I follow him. I do follow him because I love him. And if you see something negative that I say, just know I'm having a bad day. I am. It doesn't justify it. It's just that I'm having a bad day.
Same
Yeah.
man. We both.
Yeah. But Alan, I love you. I love you so much. And I really do hope that you and Ray could come out and visit. We can go hiking. I have some amazing things to show you. And let's plan on another discussion, because I think people were blessed. Whether it's blessed from God or from your perspective, just enjoyed it. Let's do this again, because I think it's fruitful either way.
100% agree, Ward.
And Alan, I wanted to say that I enjoyed meeting you.
Thank you. And it was nice to meet you too, Kirsten. Thank you for your extra work tonight. I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely, Kirsten.
You're welcome. My name's Kirsten, by the
Yeah.
way. Everybody butchers it.
Here.
Yeah.
Here, not
But
her.
I enjoyed your interview with Derek Lambert recently, so I was kind of excited to meet with you.
Oh, cool. Well, it was very nice to meet you too. I appreciate that. And hopefully we'll do this again. It'll be the trifecta.
I'm ready. I'm all for it.
Awesome. Sounds great, Kirsten.
All
Thank
right,
you.
y'all.
Okay.
You have a great night, and look forward to another episode of this with me and Alan Bondar. And we're so thankful that you joined us, and God bless you all.
Good night.